this idea of the radical king, what do we mean by radical? Really, the definition of the word radical just simply means going to the root. We've turned radical into a partisan issue and an ideological issue in the United States, but radical just means that, going to the root. Increasingly, when we think about Dr. King after the March on Washington, he becomes increasingly more radical because he tries to find solutions that are based on going to the root of the problem. And the root of the problem for King increasingly becomes going beyond just voting rights, but to understand things like poverty. And why does poverty happen? Police brutality, racial segregation, economic injustice, the marginalization and the oppression of Black people all across the United States, and really even globally. So when we think about this picture of Dr. King in March of 1965, this is an extraordinary picture. You see King to the left of King, or to King's right rather. To his left is, his immediate left is Coretta Scott King, his wife and political partner and confidant. To his immediate right in that picture is going to be Ralph Bunche, the first Black American to win the Nobel Prize. And then you're going to see Reverend Abernathy and Reverend Abernathy's wife, and then you see John Lewis in the white vest. When we think about Dr. King and voting rights, Bloody Sunday, which occurs on March 7th, 1965, is when John Lewis and others are going to be brutalized on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, a bridge in Selma named after a white supremacist Confederate military officer, are going to be brutalized for a peaceful demonstration for voting rights. This is going to be important. There's going to be blue helmeted Alabama state troopers, some on horseback, some with electrified cattle prods, who brutally beat women and youngsters and men on the Edmund Pettus Bridge. The footage of that disaster is going to be replayed on television that evening. And one of the networks, I believe it might be ABC, is going to interrupt a showing of Judgment at Nuremberg to show similar incidences of basically American-styled fascism and racism and white supremacy. And we think about Judgment at Nuremberg, obviously the Nuremberg trials tried to make sense and provide justice for the justice that you could for the genocide committed against 6 million Jews in Europe in the context of the Second World War. So when we think about the Bloody Sunday, you see those parallels. And Dr. King's not at Bloody Sunday. He's going to come down to Alabama a couple of days later, a so-called Turnaround Tuesday on March 9th, 1965, where King marches to the edge of the Pettus Bridge, but turns around because there are still Alabama state troopers that are going to brutalize the demonstrators and King if he continues.